I never thought keeping a secret would save my life. But looking back now, if I had told Derek about the apartment from the beginning, I would have lost everything I worked so hard for. Let me start from the beginning. 3 years before I met him, I was 25 years old, working crazy hours as a graphic designer for a company that paid me well but demanded everything from me. I didn't mind though, because I had a goal. While my friends were spending money on vacations and designer bags, I was saving every penny I could. I ate cheap meals, I didn't go to expensive restaurants, and I definitely didn't buy things I didn't need. My co-workers thought I was boring, my family thought I was too serious, but I didn't care what anyone thought. After 3 years of saving and working overtime whenever I could, I finally had enough money for a down payment on an apartment. Not just any apartment either, a beautiful 2-bedroom place in a safe neighborhood with good schools and nice parks. The building was clean, the neighbors were quiet, and it felt like home the moment I walked through the door. I was 28 years old when I signed those papers, and I remember crying happy tears in the empty living room. This was mine. All mine. Nobody could take it away from me. I learned something important when I bought that apartment. I learned that people treat you differently when they know you have money or own property. Suddenly, family members I barely talked to wanted to visit. Friends who never called me started asking for loans. Even my own cousin suggested I should rent out 1 bedroom to her for cheap, because family helps family. I said no to all of them. This was my achievement, my security, and I wasn't going to let anyone use me for it. That's why, when I met Derek 6 months later, I didn't mention the apartment at all. We met at a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was waiting for my latte when this good-looking guy with blonde hair and blue eyes smiled at me and said, "I think they forgot about your order. Let me get their attention for you." He was charming. He was sweet. He made me laugh by doing a funny impression of the stressed barista. We ended up talking for an hour, and he asked for my number before we left. Derek was everything I thought I wanted. He took me on nice dates. He texted me good morning every day. And he said all the right things about wanting a serious relationship. But there were small things that bothered me. Little red flags that I tried to ignore because I liked him so much. He always seemed to forget his wallet when we went out to eat. Not every time, but enough times that I noticed. He talked a lot about the money he was going to make someday, about big business deals that were almost ready, about opportunities that never quite happened. He worked in sales, but he was always between jobs or waiting for the right position. When he asked where I lived, I just said I stayed in an apartment near downtown and that I paid the bills there. It was true. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell him I owned it. He assumed I was renting, and I let him believe that. Something in my gut told me to keep this information to myself. At least until I knew him better. After 3 months of dating, Derek introduced me to his mother, Patricia. I will never forget that first meeting. We went to a fancy restaurant, the kind with cloth napkins and prices that make you nervous. Patricia walked in wearing expensive clothes and more jewelry than I'd ever seen on one person. She had perfectly styled grey hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She asked me so many questions that night. What did I do for work? How much did I make? Did I have savings? What kind of apartment did I live in? Was I close to my family? Did I expect my parents to leave me an inheritance? The questions felt more like a job interview than a nice dinner with my boyfriend's mother. Derek just sat there smiling, like this was completely normal. Patricia made comments throughout dinner that made me uncomfortable. Derek deserves someone who can contribute to his future, she said while cutting her expensive steak. He's going to be very successful, and he needs a partner who understands the value of building wealth together. I nodded politely, but inside I was annoyed. What did she think I was doing by working hard and saving my money? As Derek and I dated more seriously, I noticed how much influence Patricia had over him. She called him every single day, sometimes twice. She had opinions about everything, from what car he should buy to what cologne he should wear. And Derek listened to her like her word was law. Whenever we had a disagreement, he would say, "Well, my mother thinks it should have bothered me more than it did, but I was falling in love with him despite these warning signs." 8 months after we met, Derek proposed. It was romantic, with candles and roses and a ring that probably cost more than he could afford. I said yes because I loved him and because I thought we could build a good life together. But I still didn't tell him about owning the apartment. By this point, so much time had passed that it felt awkward to bring it up. How do you tell someone, after 8 months, that you've been keeping a major secret? My best friend Vanessa was the only person who knew the whole truth. She's a lawyer with red hair, freckles, and zero patience for nonsense. When I told her I was engaged but still hadn't mentioned the apartment to Derek, she looked at me like I was crazy. "If you're hiding your apartment from him, there's a reason," she said. "Trust that instinct. Your gut is trying to tell you something." I defended Derek. I said he just had traditional views about men being providers, and that he might feel embarrassed if he knew I owned property while he didn't. Vanessa wasn't convinced. "Traditional is fine," she said. "But hiding assets from your fiancé means you don't completely trust him. And if you don't trust him, why are you marrying him?" I didn't have a good answer for that. Deep down, I knew what I was doing. I was testing him. If Derek really loved me for who I was, then the apartment wouldn't matter when he eventually found out. If he didn't really love me, if he was with me for the wrong reasons, then keeping the apartment secret would protect me. It sounds calculated when I say it like that, but it felt more like survival instinct. The wedding was beautiful. We had it at a nice hotel with white flowers everywhere and a cake that had 5 layers. Patricia loved it because it looked expensive. Derek's whole family came, and they all seemed impressed by the fancy venue and the open bar. I paid for most of it with my savings, but I told Derek my parents had helped out. Another small lie to add to the big one. On our wedding night, we went back to the apartment, my apartment, which Derek still believed was a rental. I was exhausted and happy, ready to start our life together as husband and wife. We were standing in the living room, and Derek was looking around with this strange expression on his face. Then he pulled me close, kissed my forehead, and said something that made my heart stop. "Don't worry, honey," he said with a big smile. "Once we sell this place, we'll have enough money for a down payment on something we actually own together." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Sell this place? What was he talking about? This was a rental as far as he knew. You can't sell a rental unless he had been planning something all along. Unless he thought the apartment belonged to both of us somehow, or that I would just agree to whatever he wanted. That's when I realized Vanessa was right. My instinct to hide the truth had been protecting me all along. And now, I was married to a man who was already making plans for my property without even asking me first. The first 2 days of married life were normal. Derek went to work. I went to work. And we came home to eat dinner together, like regular newlyweds. I didn't bring up his comment about selling the apartment because I was still trying to figure out what he meant. Maybe I had misunderstood him. Maybe he was just thinking out loud about our future without really meaning anything by it. I wanted to believe the best about my new husband. On the 3rd day after our wedding, everything changed. I was at work designing a logo for a client when my phone rang. It was Derek. "Hey babe, I hope you don't mind, but my mum is having some financial trouble. I told her she could stay with us for a little while, just until she gets back on her feet." My hand froze on my computer mouse. What do you mean, stay with us? For how long? Derek's voice got that defensive tone he used whenever I questioned anything about Patricia. I don't know exactly. A few weeks, maybe a month. We have that extra bedroom, and she's my mother. She needs help. I wanted to scream. This was my home. He should have asked me before inviting anyone to move in, even his mother. But I kept my voice calm and said, "We should have talked about this first, Derek. This is a big decision." He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "She's already on her way. She'll be there in an hour. I'll see you tonight." Then he hung up. I sat at my desk, staring at my phone, feeling anger build up inside me. Patricia was moving in without my permission, into my apartment that Derek didn't even know I owned. I thought about calling him back and telling him the truth right then, but something stopped me. I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see how far this would go. When I got home that evening, Patricia was already there. She had 3 large suitcases in the hallway and was standing in my living room like she owned the place. "Oh good, you're finally home," she said, not even bothering with a hello. "Derek gave me the spare key. I've been rearranging some things. You had the furniture in all the wrong places, and these decorations were so cheap looking. I put them in the closet for you." I looked around my living room and felt my face get hot. She had moved my couch, taken down my pictures from the walls, and removed the plants I loved from the windowsill. "Patricia, those were my things. You can't just throw away my decorations." She waved her hand like I was being silly. "Oh, sweetie, I didn't throw them away. I just put them somewhere out of sight. You'll thank me later. This place looks much better now." Derek came home an hour later and acted like everything was perfectly normal. When I tried to talk to him privately about his mother rearranging everything, he said, "She's just trying to help. You're being sensitive." That night, I lay in bed next to my husband and realized I had made a terrible mistake. But I was married now, and Patricia was living in my home, and I still hadn't told anyone the truth about owning it. The next few days were a nightmare. Patricia acted like she had always lived there. She went through my kitchen cabinets and threw away food she didn't like. She invited her friends over for lunch without asking me. She used my expensive face cream and my nice towels without permission. When I came home from work, she would be sitting on my couch, watching my television, eating my food, and she would barely look up to acknowledge me. But the worst part was the things she said. "When Derek and I sell this place, we should look for something with a bigger kitchen," she mentioned one morning while drinking my coffee. I stared at her. "What do you mean when you sell this place?" She smiled at me like I was stupid. "Well, you're renting right now, aren't you? Derek told me you two want to buy something together. We'll need to find a cheaper apartment for you to rent while you save up the down payment." My hands shook as I poured my own coffee. She said, "We," like she was part of my marriage. She said, "Derek and I," like I wasn't even involved in decisions about my own home. And she had no idea that this apartment was mine, that I owned every single inch of it, and that neither she nor Derek had any right to make plans about it. I started noticing that Patricia and Derek had private conversations that stopped whenever I walked into the room. They would be talking quietly in the kitchen, and as soon as they heard my footsteps, they would change the subject or go silent. It made me feel like a stranger in my own home, like they were keeping secrets from me. One afternoon, I left work early because I wasn't feeling well. I had a headache and just wanted to lie down in my own bed. When I walked into the apartment, I heard voices in the kitchen. Patricia and Derek didn't know I was home. I stood in the hallway, hidden from view, and listened. "You need to convince her to move somewhere cheaper," Patricia was saying. "Look at this place. The rent must be expensive. If you moved to a smaller apartment, you could rent out this one and pocket the difference." Or better yet, tell the landlord you want to buy it, negotiate a good price because you're already living here, then flip it for a profit. I know a real estate agent who could help. My heart was beating so hard I thought they might hear it. Derek responded, and his words cut me like a knife. I'm working on it, Mum. She's really attached to this place for some reason, but she'll come around. Women always do once you explain things the right way. We just need to be patient. Patricia laughed. Patient? Derek, you've been married less than a week. You need to establish who makes the financial decisions now, before she gets too comfortable thinking she has equal say. Derek said something I couldn't hear clearly, and they both laughed. I quietly backed out of the apartment and sat in my car for 30 minutes, crying. My husband and his mother were plotting to use me. They wanted to profit from my apartment without caring what I wanted. They were talking about me like I was too stupid to understand money, like I was just some woman who needed a man to make decisions for her. That night, Derek started a conversation about our future. We were sitting on the couch, the one Patricia had moved to the wrong spot, and he put his arm around me. Babe, I've been thinking about our finances. We're paying a lot for this place, and we should really be saving money for our future. What if we looked at some smaller apartments, something cheaper, where we could save up faster for a house? I looked at him carefully. Who would benefit from us moving? His face changed. What kind of question is that? We would benefit. Both of us. Why are you being so difficult about this? I kept my voice calm. I'm not being difficult. I'm asking a simple question. If we move somewhere cheaper, what happens to this apartment? Derek got frustrated. I don't know. We tell the landlord we're leaving, and they find new tenants. That's how renting works. Why are you asking me these weird questions? I'm trying to plan our future, and you're acting like I'm doing something wrong. I didn't say anything else that night. I just went to bed early and lay there in the dark, thinking about everything. Vanessa had been right all along. I couldn't trust Derek, and now I was stuck in a marriage with a man who saw me as a tool to make money. Things got worse over the next week. Patricia started opening my mail. I caught her one day with my bank statement in her hand, reading through my transactions. What are you doing? I asked, grabbing it from her. She didn't even look embarrassed. I was just curious about how you manage your money. Derek and I are concerned that you're not being smart with your spending. I immediately changed all my mail to paperless delivery. I wasn't going to let her spy on my finances anymore. But the damage was done. She had seen how much money I had in my account, and I knew she had told Derek. Patricia also started making comments about how I wasn't contributing enough to the household. Never mind that I was paying for groceries, utilities, internet, and every other bill except Derek's car payment and the expensive food Patricia liked to buy. Derek works so hard, she would say. You should appreciate him more, maybe cook nicer dinners, or keep the house cleaner. Every time Patricia criticized me, Derek backed her up. If I defended myself, he would say I was being disrespectful to his mother. If I asked him to talk to her about her behavior, he said I was being too sensitive. I was losing this battle, and I knew it. Then, one evening, Patricia made an announcement that changed everything. She was sitting at my dining table, eating my food, and she said with a big smile, I called my friend Harold today. He's a real estate agent. He's coming tomorrow afternoon to appraise this place, so we know what we're working with when we talk to your landlord about buying it. Derek nodded like this was a great idea. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, and realized that tomorrow everything would explode. Tomorrow, they would find out the truth. Tomorrow, Harold, the real estate agent, would tell them that I owned this apartment. And tomorrow, I would see who Derek really was. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in bed next to Derek, listening to him snore peacefully, while my mind raced with thoughts about what would happen the next day. Part of me wanted to tell him the truth right then, to wake him up and explain everything before the real estate agent arrived. But another part of me, the smarter part, wanted to see this play out. I wanted to watch what Derek and Patricia would do when they thought they were about to profit from my property. At 6 in the morning, I got up quietly and went to the living room. I found Harold's business card that Patricia had left on the kitchen counter and called his number. He answered on the third ring, sounding sleepy. "Hello? Mr. Phillips, this is the owner of the apartment you're supposed to appraise today. I need to talk to you about something very important before you arrive." I explained the whole situation to him in a whisper so Derek wouldn't hear. I told him about the secret, about Patricia and Derek's plans, about everything I had overheard. When I finished, there was silence on the other end of the phone. Then Mr. Phillips laughed. Not a mean laugh, but a surprised one. "Ma'am, I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've never heard anything like this. You want me to come do the appraisal and just see what happens when they find out you're the owner?" I confirmed that yes, that was exactly what I wanted. He agreed to help me, and we planned exactly how it would go. I went to work that morning like normal, but I told my boss I had a family emergency and needed to leave at lunch. Derek had taken the afternoon off to be there for the appraisal, and Patricia had been cooking a nice lunch for Mr. Phillips like he was an honored guest instead of just someone doing his job. When I got home at 1 o'clock, Patricia had set the dining table with my good plates and made sandwiches that probably cost $30 in ingredients. Derek was wearing his best shirt and had styled his hair like he was going to a job interview. They both looked at me with annoyance when I walked in. "Why are you home?" Patricia asked. "This is important business. We don't need you hovering around." I smiled sweetly. "This is where I live. I think I have a right to be here." Derek frowned, but didn't argue. He was too excited about the appraisal to fight with me. Mr. Phillips arrived 15 minutes later. He was a short man with grey hair and kind eyes, and he carried a leather folder that made him look very professional. Patricia practically ran to the door to let him in, shaking his hand like he was a celebrity. "Harold, thank you so much for coming on such short notice. Can I get you some coffee? A sandwich?" Mr. Phillips smiled politely. "No thank you, Patricia. Let's just get started with the appraisal." He walked through the apartment slowly, taking notes on his phone and measuring rooms with a laser tool. Patricia and Derek followed him around like puppies, pointing out features they thought would increase the value. "We've really taken good care of this place," Derek said, which was funny because he had only lived here for a week. "The previous tenants must have been very responsible too, because everything is in great condition." Patricia nodded eagerly. "Once we buy it from the landlord, we're thinking of doing some improvements. Maybe new cabinets in the kitchen. Definitely new carpet in the bedrooms. Then we can flip it for a nice profit." I sat on the couch, watching this performance, feeling my anger grow with every word. They were spending my money in their heads, making plans for my property, and acting like I didn't exist. Mr. Phillips caught my eye a few times, and I could see he was trying not to smile. After 30 minutes of walking through every room, taking pictures, and making notes, Mr. Phillips came back to the living room. Patricia and Derek sat down across from him, leaning forward with excited expressions. I stayed on the couch, off to the side, just watching. "Well, Mr. Phillips said, opening his folder. "This is definitely an interesting situation," Patricia beamed. "We think it's worth quite a bit, right? This neighborhood has gotten so much nicer in the past few years." Mr. Phillips nodded slowly. "Yes, the property value has increased significantly, but before I can give you any information about pricing or market value, I need to clarify something. Which one of you is the actual owner of this apartment?" The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Patricia's smile froze on her face. Derek's eyebrows came together in confusion. "Owner? Derek said slowly. Harold, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We don't own this place. We're renting it. That's why we called you, to find out what it's worth, so we can make an offer to buy it from the landlord. Mr. Phillips looked even more confused now, and I knew he was doing a great job of acting. That's very strange, because I pulled the property records before coming here. And according to public records, this apartment is owned by... He paused and looked directly at me, then said my full legal name clearly. I will never forget the look on Derek's face in that moment. His expression went from confusion to shock to understanding to anger in about 5 seconds. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Patricia's face turned red, then white, then red again. She looked at me, then at Mr. Phillips, then back at me. That's impossible, Derek finally said, his voice shaking. You never told me you owned this place. You let me believe it was a rental. You lied to me. I stood up from the couch and walked closer to where they were sitting. I never lied, Derek. You asked where I lived, and I told you I lived here and paid the bills. Both of those things are true. You assumed it was a rental. I just never corrected your assumption. Patricia found her voice then, and it came out as a screech. You manipulative little liar! You trapped my son! You married him under false pretenses. I turned to look at her, and I felt calmer than I had in weeks. False pretenses? That's interesting coming from you, Patricia. Should we talk about the conversation I overheard last week? The one where you and Derek were planning to trick the landlord into selling cheap so you could flip my apartment for profit. Derek stood up so fast his chair almost fell over. You were listening to our private conversations. That's an invasion of privacy. I laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. This is my home, Derek. My apartment that I bought with my money 3 years before I met you. There are no private conversations here that don't involve me. Everything that happens in this apartment is my business, because I own it. Mr. Phillips cleared his throat quietly. I think I should leave and let you folks work this out privately. He packed up his folder and headed for the door. As he passed me, he whispered, "Good luck." And then he was gone. The moment the door closed, Derek exploded. He started yelling about trust and honesty and how marriages were supposed to be based on sharing everything. A wife is supposed to tell her husband about her assets, about her property. You've been lying to me since the day we met. I stayed calm, which seemed to make him even angrier. Where's your bank account information, Derek? Where's your investment portfolio? Your savings account? Oh, that's right. You don't have any of those things because you're broke. You've been late on your car payments twice since we got married. Your credit cards are maxed out. But I'm supposed to share everything with you while you share nothing with me. Patricia jumped in, her voice full of venom. How dare you speak to my son that way? He works hard for his money. I turned to her. Does he, Patricia? Because from what I've seen, he works occasionally and spends money he doesn't have. And you're no better. You moved into my home without asking permission, threw away my belongings, opened my mail, and made plans to profit from my property. Both of you have been using me. Derek's face was purple now. I'm your husband. That means something. That means I have rights. I felt my own anger rising finally. Rights to what, exactly? Rights to my apartment that I bought before I knew you existed. Rights to make plans behind my back. Rights to bring your mother into my home and let her disrespect me every single day. The fight went on for 2 more hours. Derek accused me of being a gold digger, which was funny because I was the one with money. Patricia called me every mean name she could think of. They both acted like I was the villain in this story, like I had done something terrible by protecting what was mine. Finally, when I was exhausted and hoarse from arguing, Derek said something that made my blood run cold. This isn't over. I'm your husband. In this state, marital property is shared property. I have legal rights to this apartment, whether you like it or not. Patricia smiled for the first time since Mr. Phillips had dropped the bomb. He's right, sweetheart. You might have bought it before marriage, but now that you're married, Derek is entitled to half of everything you own, including this apartment. So either you can be smart and work with us, or we can get lawyers involved and take what's legally ours. I looked at my husband and my mother-in-law, and I realized I was in serious trouble. I couldn't breathe properly. My chest felt tight, and my hands were shaking. Were they right? Could Derek actually take half of my apartment just because we were married? I had bought it 3 years before I even met him. How could that be fair? But Patricia looked so confident, so sure of herself, and Derek had that mean smile on his face, like he had already won. I went into the bedroom and closed the door. My fingers fumbled with my phone as I called Vanessa. She answered immediately. "What's wrong? You sound terrible." The words came pouring out of me, everything about the appraisal, the fight, Derek's threats, Patricia's claims about marital property. When I finished, I was crying so hard I could barely speak. Vanessa's voice changed. It became sharp and professional, her lawyer voice. "Listen to me very carefully. Stop crying and listen. They are lying to you. That apartment is yours. You bought it before marriage with your own money. It's called separate property, and Derek has absolutely no claim to it. Do you understand me? They're trying to scare you into giving them money." I felt like I could breathe again. "Are you sure?" Patricia sounded so certain. Vanessa made an angry noise. "Patricia is not a lawyer, and she's banking on you being too scared to check the facts. I'm coming over right now. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't let them intimidate you." She arrived 30 minutes later with her briefcase and a huge coffee for me. Patricia and Derek were still in the living room, whispering to each other and looking at legal websites on Derek's phone. When Vanessa walked in, Patricia stood up with her arms crossed. "Who is this?" "I'm her lawyer," Vanessa said coldly. "And we need to talk about your false claims regarding marital property law." Patricia's face went pale, but she tried to hide it. "We don't need to discuss anything with you. This is between my son and his wife." Vanessa pulled out a folder from her briefcase. "Actually, when you threaten legal action against my client, it becomes my business. Would you like me to explain how separate property works in this state? Or would you prefer to continue making threats based on laws you clearly don't understand?" Derek jumped up. "You can't just bring a lawyer into our home without discussing it with me first." I found my voice then. "This is my home, Derek. Mine. And I can invite anyone I want into it, including my lawyer, especially my lawyer, since you and your mother are threatening to sue me." Vanessa sat down at my dining table and opened her folder. She explained everything in simple terms. The apartment was purchased before marriage with my separate funds. It remained my separate property. Derek had no claim to it. If we got divorced tomorrow, he would leave with exactly what he brought into the marriage, which was nothing. Patricia's face got redder and redder as Vanessa spoke. When she finished, there was silence. Then Derek said something that shocked me. "Fine. Maybe I can't take the apartment legally, but I'm not leaving. I'm your husband, and I live here. You can't kick me out." Patricia nodded quickly. "That's right, and I'm his guest. Try to evict us and see what happens. We'll drag this out in court for months, maybe years. How much will that cost you in lawyer fees?" Vanessa looked at me, and I could see she was thinking, they have a point. Eviction can be a long process, especially for a spouse, but there are other options. She turned to Derek and Patricia. "Every threat you make, every harassing action, every time you prevent her from peaceful enjoyment of her property, we document it. Then we file for a restraining order. Let's see how a judge feels about a husband and mother-in-law who moved in and immediately started trying to steal the wife's property. The next 2 weeks were the worst of my life. Patricia refused to move out. She acted like she owned the place even more than before. She would blast music late at night when I was trying to sleep. Derek changed the Wi-Fi password and wouldn't give it to me. When I changed it back using the router, he unplugged the router and hid it. I had to buy a new one. My clothes started disappearing from the dryer in the building's laundry room. I would put in a load of washing, come back an hour later, and my favorite shirts would be gone. I knew it was Patricia, but I couldn't prove it. Food I bought would vanish overnight. The expensive coffee I liked, the special bread from the bakery, even my leftovers from restaurants. Everything disappeared. I started keeping my important belongings in my car. My laptop, my jewelry, my important documents. I didn't trust them anymore. The apartment that used to feel like my safe space now felt like enemy territory. I would come home from work with my stomach in knots, not knowing what I would find. Derek stopped sleeping in our bedroom. He moved into the spare room with his mother, which was disturbing on many levels. They would have long conversations late at night, and I could hear them through the walls talking about me, planning their next move. Sometimes I would hear Patricia laughing, a mean sound that made my skin crawl. At work, I couldn't focus on anything. My boss asked if everything was okay because I had missed 3 deadlines. I was spending thousands of dollars on lawyer fees. Every meeting with Vanessa cost money. Every legal document she filed cost money. Derek and Patricia were bleeding me dry without even trying, just by refusing to leave and making my life miserable. My neighbor, Mr. Thompson, knocked on my door one Thursday evening. He was a kind old man with white hair who had lived in the building for 20 years. He always said hello in the hallways and sometimes left cookies by my door during holidays. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said quietly, "but I've been hearing everything through the walls. The fighting, the music at night, the yelling. I know what they're doing to you." I felt tears start again. I had been crying so much lately that my eyes were always red and puffy. "I'm sorry about the noise, Mr. Thompson. I'm trying to fix the situation." He shook his head. "You don't need to apologize. You're the victim here. I just wanted you to know that if you need someone to testify about what's been happening, about the harassment and the noise and all of it, I'm willing to do that. I've been writing down dates and times in my diary. I want to help you." His kindness broke something inside me. I hugged him, this sweet old man who barely knew me but could see I was drowning. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you so much." He patted my back like I was his granddaughter. "Those people are bullies. Don't let them win." Vanessa was building a case. She had me document everything with photos and videos. Every time Patricia moved my things, I took pictures. Every threatening text from Derek, I saved. Every noise complaint from other neighbors, Vanessa collected. She was creating a file that showed exactly what they were doing to me. "We're going to file for a restraining order and eviction," she explained during one of our meetings. "The judge will see all of this evidence, all of this harassment, and he'll understand that you're being abused in your own home. Derek might be your husband, but that doesn't give him the right to torture you." But Derek and Patricia had lawyers too. Patricia's cousin was a divorce attorney with a reputation for being aggressive and mean. His name was Lawrence, and he sent us letters filled with legal threats. He claimed I had abandoned the marriage by refusing to share my assets. He said Derek was entitled to spousal support. He even suggested that I owed Patricia rent for staying in the spare bedroom. Every letter from Lawrence cost me more money to respond to. Every claim had to be answered with legal documents. Every threat had to be taken seriously, even though most of them were nonsense. This was their strategy. They couldn't win legally, so they were trying to make the fight so expensive and exhausting that I would just give them money to go away. One night, I came home to find Derek had brought a locksmith to change the locks on the apartment. I pulled into the parking lot and saw a van with 24-hour locksmith written on the side. My heart started racing as I ran upstairs. Derek was standing at my door with a man who was installing a new lock. "What are you doing?" I shouted. Derek smiled at me. That same mean smile. "This is my home too. I'm protecting my investment. I don't trust you not to lock me out, so I'm changing the locks to something only I have the key to." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called the police. Derek's smile faded. "You're calling the cops on your own husband?" The locksmith looked uncomfortable and started packing up his tools. "Man, I don't want to be involved in a domestic situation. I'm leaving." The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 officers, a man and a woman, came up to the apartment and asked what was going on. I explained that Derek was trying to change the locks on my property without my permission. Derek argued that he lived here and had every right to change the locks. The female officer asked to see identification and proof of ownership. I showed them my driver's license with this address and pulled up the property records on my phone, showing my name as the owner. Derek had nothing but his driver's license with his mother's old address. The male officer looked at Derek seriously. "Sir, you cannot change locks on a property you don't own without the owner's permission. That's illegal." Derek's face turned purple with rage. His hands were in fists at his sides, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit someone. "This is my wife's apartment, which makes it mine too. We're married." The female officer shook her head. "That's not how property law works, sir. If the deed is in her name from before the marriage, it's her separate property. You'll need to work this out with lawyers, but you cannot change these locks." After the police left, Derek stood in the hallway, staring at me with pure hatred in his eyes. Patricia had come out of the apartment and was watching with her arms crossed. Derek took a step toward me, and his voice was quiet and cold. "You're going to regret this. You're going to lose everything. I'm going to make sure you pay for humiliating me like this, in front of the police." I looked at my husband. This man I had loved enough to marry, and I didn't recognize him anymore. "I already lost everything, Derek. I lost my peace, my home, my trust. The only thing I have left is this apartment, and I'm not letting you take it from me." The day of the court hearing finally arrived 3 weeks later. I had barely slept the night before, going over everything in my mind. Vanessa had prepared a thick folder full of evidence. Photographs of my belongings that Patricia had thrown away. Text messages where Derek threatened me. Noise complaints from Mr. Fryve, Thompson and 2 other neighbors. Bank statements showing I had paid every single bill while Derek contributed nothing. And the police report from the locksmith incident. I wore a simple blue dress and pulled my hair back in a neat ponytail. Vanessa had told me to look professional, but not fancy, to show the judge I was a normal person being harassed in my own home. Derek showed up in an expensive suit that I knew he couldn't afford, probably borrowed from someone. Patricia wore a black dress with so much jewelry she looked like she was going to a fancy party, not a court hearing. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh and cold. The judge was a woman in her 60s with grey hair and glasses, and she had a serious expression that made me nervous. Her name was Judge Martinez, and Vanessa had told me she was fair but strict and didn't like people who wasted her time. Vanessa presented our case first. She showed the judge the property records, proving I had bought the apartment 3 years before meeting Derek. She explained how Derek and Patricia had moved in and immediately started planning to profit from my property without my knowledge. She played a recording on her phone that I had made of Patricia and Derek discussing their scheme to buy the apartment cheap and flip it. I had been so scared to record them, hiding my phone in my pocket. But Vanessa said it was legal because it was in my own home. Judge Martinez listened carefully, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When Vanessa showed her the photographs of my clothes that had been thrown away and the police report about the locks, the judge's eyebrows went up. "Mr. Carson," she said, looking at Derek, "did you attempt to change the locks on a property you don't own?" Derek stood up quickly, his face red. "Your Honor, that's my wife's apartment. I live there. I should have a say in security measures." Judge Martinez looked at him over her glasses. "That's not what I asked. Did you or did you not attempt to change the locks without the property owner's permission?" Derek's lawyer, Lawrence, stood up and tried to say something about marital rights, but the judge held up her hand. "I'll get to you in a moment, Counselor. Mr. Carson, answer the question." Derek mumbled something, and the judge asked him to speak up. "Yes, I tried to change the locks, but only because I felt unsafe." Judge Martinez wrote something down. "Unsafe from your wife, the woman you've been living with, the woman whose property you've been residing in rent-free." Derek didn't have an answer for that. Then it was Lawrence's turn to present Derek and Patricia's side. He stood up with confidence and started talking about how marriage was a sacred bond that required sharing and trust. He claimed I had entered the marriage under false pretenses by hiding my assets. He said Derek was entitled to live in the apartment as my spouse, and that I was trying to kick him out over a simple disagreement. Judge Martinez interrupted him. "Counselor, I've reviewed the case file. Your client's wife purchased this property 3 years before they met. It's clearly separate property. What exactly is your legal argument for Mr. Carson having any claim to it?" Lawrence stumbled over his words, talking about good faith and reasonable expectations. The judge didn't look impressed. Then Lawrence called Derek to testify. Derek sat in the witness chair and tried to make himself look like the victim. He talked about how much he loved me, how he thought we were building a life together, how devastated he was to discover I had hidden the apartment from him. "I just wanted us to be honest with each other," he said, and I saw him wipe fake tears from his eyes. "I thought marriage meant no secrets." Vanessa stood up for cross-examination, and I had never been more grateful for my best friend. "Mr. Carson, when you met my client, did you tell her about your credit card debt?" Derek looked uncomfortable. "That's different. That's personal," Vanessa smiled. "So financial information is personal when it's yours, but not when it's hers. Did you tell her you had been evicted from your previous apartment for not paying rent?" Derek's face went white. "I didn't even know about that. That was a misunderstanding with my landlord." Vanessa pulled out a document. "According to court records, you were evicted after being 3 months behind on rent. Did you share this information with my client before proposing marriage?" Derek was silent. Vanessa continued. "And when you moved into my client's apartment after the wedding, did you contribute to rent, utilities, groceries, or any other household expenses?" Derek shifted in his seat. "I paid for some things." Vanessa showed the judge my bank statements. "These records show that my client paid 100% of the household expenses for the entire time you lived there. You didn't contribute a single dollar. Is that correct?" Derek tried to argue, but the numbers didn't lie. Judge Martinez was frowning now, looking at Derek like he was something unpleasant she had found on her shoe. Then Vanessa called Mr. Thompson to testify. My sweet elderly neighbor walked slowly to the witness stand, with his diary in hand. He told the judge about the loud music late at night, the shouting matches, the threats he had heard through the walls. "I've lived in that building for 20 years, he said in his gentle voice. "I've never heard anything like this before. That poor girl is being terrorized in her own home by her husband and his mother." Patricia made a sound of outrage from where she was sitting, and the judge gave her a warning look. Mr. Thompson continued, reading from his diary entries with dates and times. March 15th, loud music until 2 in the morning. March 17th, shouting match, where I heard Mr. Carson call his wife terrible names. March 20th, I saw Mrs. Carson Sr. throwing bags of garbage in the hallway that I later learned contained the young lady's belongings. When Mr. Thompson finished, there were tears in his eyes. "I have a granddaughter about her age," he said to the judge. "If someone treated my granddaughter this way, I would want someone to speak up for her. So that's what I'm doing." Judge Martinez took a break to review all the evidence. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. I sat with Vanessa in the hallway, drinking terrible coffee from a vending machine, trying not to throw up from nervousness. Derek and Patricia sat on the other side of the hallway with Lawrence, whispering angrily among themselves. Patricia kept glaring at me like she wanted to hurt me. When we went back into the courtroom, Judge Martinez had made her decision. She didn't waste any time. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented today, and frankly, I'm appalled by what I've seen. Mr. Carson, you moved into your wife's property, contributed nothing financially, attempted to illegally change the locks, and participated in a scheme to defraud her out of her home. Mrs. Carson Sr., you moved in without permission and engaged in systematic harassment." The judge looked directly at Derek. "I'm granting the restraining order. You are to remove yourself and your mother from the property within 48 hours. You are not to contact the plaintiff except through your attorney. You are not to come within 500 feet of her or her residence. If you violate this order, you will be arrested." Derek jumped up. "You can't do this. I'm her husband. I have rights." Judge Martinez's voice became ice cold. "Sit down, Mr. Carson, or I will hold you in contempt. Your marriage does not give you the right to harass, threaten, or steal from your spouse. The restraining order stands." Then she turned to the question of the marriage itself. "Mrs. Carson," she said to me, "I strongly suggest you file for divorce or annulment immediately. This marriage lasted less than a month before your husband showed his true intentions. You may have grounds for annulment based on fraud." Vanessa nodded. "We'll be filing for annulment this week, Your Honor." Judge Martinez signed several documents and handed them to the court clerk. "This hearing is concluded. Mr. Carson, Mrs. Carson Sr., you have 48 hours. Officers will be present to ensure you remove only your personal belongings and nothing that belongs to the plaintiff." Derek and Patricia left the courtroom in fury. Lawrence looked frustrated, but not surprised. I think he had known they would lose. Vanessa hugged me tight. "You did it! You won! They have to leave!" I couldn't stop shaking. Relief and leftover fear and exhaustion all mixed together until I couldn't tell what I was feeling anymore. 2 days later, police officers came to supervise Derek and Patricia moving out. They had surprisingly few belongings for people who had acted like they owned the place. Derek wouldn't look at me as he carried boxes to his mother's car. Patricia spat at my feet as she walked past, and one of the officers warned her she could be arrested for that. Before Derek left, he stopped at the door and finally looked at me. "You really couldn't just share. You had to destroy our marriage over an apartment." I looked at the man I had married and felt nothing but sadness. "You destroyed our marriage when you decided my property was worth more than my trust. I hope someday you understand that." After they left, I walked through my apartment with Vanessa. It felt empty and quiet, like a place that had been through a war. "What do I do now?" I asked her. She squeezed my shoulder. "Now you change the locks with your own locksmith. You clean this place from top to bottom to get rid of their energy. You file for annulment. And you start healing." The annulment went through 3 months later. Derek tried to fight it. But when his lawyer saw all the evidence of fraud and deception, he advised Derek to let it go. I never had to see Derek again after that day in court. I did change the locks. I repainted the walls. I bought new furniture. I threw away everything that reminded me of Derek and Patricia. Mr. Thompson helped me pick out new plants for the windowsill, and they grew better than the old ones ever did. 6 months after the nightmare ended, I was sitting on my couch with Vanessa, drinking wine and watching a movie. "Do you regret keeping the apartment secret?" she asked me. I thought about it for a long time before answering. No, if I had told Derek from the beginning, he would have married me anyway. And then slowly convinced me to sell it or refinance it, or do something that would have given him access to my money. The secret protected me. It gave me time to see who he really was. Vanessa raised her glass. To trusting your instincts. I clinked my glass against hers. To protecting what's yours. I learned important lessons from this experience. I learned that real love doesn't try to steal from you. I learned that keeping some things private isn't the same as lying. I learned that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. And most importantly, I learned that I was strong enough to fight for myself, even when it was scary and expensive and exhausting. My apartment is truly mine now, in every way that matters. No one lives here who doesn't respect me. No one makes plans for my property without my permission, and when I come home after a long day, I feel safe again. That's worth more than any marriage built on lies ever could be.